Hey everyone, welcome back to the MANO podcast. I'm MANO, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here with me today. If you're listening to this right now, it means you care about improving yourself, and that's incredible. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to remind you of something really important. If you're enjoying this content and finding value in it, please like this episode, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. But here's the thing, that's not just a casual ask. You know why? Because we're building something special here. We're creating a community of people who are committed to growth. So make sure you check out our podcast playlist for more episodes just like this one. We drop fresh content regularly, and each episode is designed to help you become better at English, better at communication, and better at thinking. The podcast playlist is where you'll find all our episodes organized and ready for you to binge. Now, let's get into today's absolutely game-changing topic. Today, we're talking about something that, honestly, I wish someone had explained to me this thoroughly when I was younger. We're diving deep into the world of reading and why it's not just important, it's absolutely transformative. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Mano, why are we talking about reading? I thought we were learning English here. Well, that's exactly where most people get it wrong. Reading isn't just about learning English. Reading is about unlocking your entire potential as a communicator, as a thinker, and as a person. So stick with me on this journey because by the end of this episode, you're going to understand why reading is literally the secret weapon that separates fluent speakers from people who struggle their whole lives. Let me start with a question. How many of you have picked up a book in the last month? And I don't mean scrolling through your phone, I mean actually reading. Sitting down with a physical book or a quality article and spending time with it. If you didn't raise your hand, you're not alone. In today's world, we're so caught up in videos, podcasts, yes, even podcasts like this one, short-form content, and quick notifications that actual reading feels almost ancient. But here's what I want you to understand, and please really listen to this. If you're not reading, you're not growing. It's that simple. And if you're learning English without reading, you're basically trying to build a house without a foundation. You might get walls up, but everything's unstable. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine two students. Both are learning English, both take classes, both do exercises, both practice speaking. But student A, they also read. They read stories, articles, blogs, anything that interests them. Student B, they skip the reading part. They think it's boring. They think it's old-fashioned. Fast forward 6 months, what's the difference? Student A has vocabulary that goes beyond textbooks. They understand nuances. They can understand movies and podcasts without subtitles. They sound natural when they speak. Student B, they're still using the same 500 words they learned in class. They sound robotic. They get confused in real conversations. They've hit a plateau. Why? Because reading is the fuel that powers everything else in language learning. Without it, you're running on empty. So today, for the next hour or so, depending on how deep we go, I want to walk you through everything you need to know about reading. Not just why it matters, but how to do it, what to read, how to practice, and how to make reading such a natural part of your life that you can't imagine not doing it. This is going to be practical, this is going to be real, and this is going to change the way you approach English learning permanently. Let's start with something basic that most people don't understand. What is reading? I mean, really, what is reading? Most people think, oh, reading is just looking at words on a page. If you think that, you're missing the magic. Reading is so much more than that. Reading is actually a complex process. It's understanding, absorbing, connecting ideas, and building knowledge. When you read, especially when you're reading in a language you're learning, multiple things are happening in your brain at once. First, you're decoding letters into words. That's obvious. But then you're assigning meaning to those words. Then you're connecting those words to form phrases. Then those phrases to form ideas. Then those ideas to previous ideas. You're building a mental model of what you're reading about. You're engaging your imagination. You're creating pictures in your mind. You're feeling emotions. You're asking questions. You're thinking critically. It's like your brain is running 1,000 processes simultaneously. This is why reading is so powerful for learning a language. Every single time you read, you're training multiple skills at the same time. Think about it this way. When you read a sentence in English, you're not just learning the words. You're learning how English speakers arrange those words. You're learning grammar in context, which is infinitely more powerful than learning grammar in a classroom. You're learning how ideas flow together. You're learning punctuation and what it means. You're learning the rhythm of English sentences. You're learning about English culture, values, and ways of thinking through the content. You're learning emotional expressions. You're learning figurative language. You're building intuition for what sounds right and what sounds wrong. You're creating neural pathways in your brain that make English feel more natural over time. Let me give you an example. Let's say you come across this sentence while reading. The old man shuffled slowly up the stairs, gripping the handrail as if his life depended on it. What are you learning from that one sentence? You're learning the word shuffled, which is a very specific way of walking that conveys age and difficulty. You're learning the structure of a descriptive sentence. You're learning that similes, the as-if phrase, can add color to your descriptions. You're learning how to write vivid descriptions yourself. You're learning vocabulary that textbooks might not teach you. You're learning the implied meaning, that this man is elderly and struggling. A textbook might teach you shuffled means to walk slowly, but this sentence teaches you the emotion, the context, and the usage all together. And here's what's really interesting. Many learners believe that speaking is the most important skill in language learning. I'm not going to completely disagree with you, because speaking is definitely important. But I want to challenge that belief. Speaking without reading becomes limited very quickly. Think about what you need to speak fluently. You need vocabulary, you need grammar, you need to know how to structure your thoughts. You need to understand natural expressions and idioms. You need to develop fluency and confidence. Where do all of these come from? Reading. Reading feeds your brain with all the raw material that makes speaking powerful. Imagine someone who wants to speak English fluently, but never reads anything. What happens? Well, they might know a few common phrases, they might have everyday vocabulary, but the moment you ask them something even slightly beyond the basics, they freeze. They struggle. They don't know how to express deeper thoughts. They don't understand when others talk about more complex topics. They sound robotic and repetitive. They use the same few sentence structures over and over. Compare that to someone who reads. This person has access to advanced vocabulary. They understand nuances. They've heard different ways of expressing the same idea. They can adapt their language depending on the situation. They sound natural. They sound educated. They sound like someone you actually want to have a conversation with. Reading gives you access to the advanced, interesting, and beautiful parts of English that you simply won't find in textbooks or language apps. Think about this. Language apps are designed for convenience and quick learning. They're usually limited. They give you the basics. But real English, the English that native speakers actually use, is far richer. It's full of expressions, idioms, cultural references, and beautiful ways of saying things. When you read novels, for example, you come across phrases like, she was lost in thought, or he burst into laughter. These are natural phrases that make your English sound like a native speaker's English. You won't learn these on an app. You'll only learn them through reading. And once you start using them, people notice. They think, wow, this person really speaks English well. But really, you just read. That's it. You invested time in reading, and it made all the difference. You know what I love most about teaching English? It's the transformation stories. The moments when I see someone go from struggling to thriving. And almost every single transformation story I've witnessed has one thing in common: reading. Let me tell you about a student. Let's call him Rahan. I remember Rahan when he first came to me. He was frustrated. He'd been learning English for 3 years. He'd taken classes, he'd done all the exercises, but he felt stuck. He couldn't understand movies, he couldn't read articles. He certainly couldn't write anything decent. And when he spoke, it was painful, both for him and for the person listening. He'd get stuck between words. He'd translate everything in his head before speaking. He sounded unnatural. The first thing Rahan told me was, "Man, I hate reading. I've never liked reading in school. I find it boring and difficult." Now, this is something I hear a lot. Many people think reading is boring. But Rahan had a misconception. He thought reading meant reading textbooks or complicated novels. He didn't realize that reading is whatever genuinely interests you. So I didn't force him to read Shakespeare or classic literature. Instead, I asked him, "What do you love? What could you read about for hours without getting bored?" And Rahan said, "I love traveling. I watch travel videos all the time." Perfect. So I gave him one simple assignment. Find a book or articles about travel written in English. Pick something about a place you want to visit. Start reading. At first, he was skeptical, but one day he picked up a short book, not even very long, about a young traveler's adventures across Southeast Asia. At first, he found it hard. He told me he had to look up a lot of words. Every paragraph took him a while. It was frustrating. But here's what's important. He kept going. He didn't give up. Day after day, he read a little bit more. And then something magical happened. He started understanding more with each page. He started looking up new words and writing them down. Instead of just looking at them and forgetting them, he started using them in conversations. He'd tell me, "Mano, I used the word wanderlust in a sentence yesterday." And he was so proud. He was building momentum. His confidence was growing. He started reading more. He picked up other books about travel. He started following travel blogs in English. He started watching travel videos with English subtitles and understanding them better because he was now familiar with travel vocabulary. Within 3 months, and I want you to really let this sink in, within just 3 months, his vocabulary had doubled. Not because he was cramming words, not because he was doing vocabulary exercises, but because he was reading about something he loved. His reading comprehension improved dramatically. More importantly, when he spoke, he sounded different. He sounded knowledgeable about travel. He could talk about landscapes, experiences, cultures, and emotions with real depth. He started writing his own short travel stories. He shared them with me, and they were good. Not perfect, but genuinely good. He joined travel communities online, where English speakers discuss destinations and experiences. He made friends, real friendships. With people from different countries, they were having meaningful conversations, all because he started reading. And here's what Rahan told me after 3 months. "Man, I can't believe how much I've improved. And the weirdest part is I don't feel like I'm studying. I'm just reading about something I love. And somehow I'm learning more than I ever did in classes." That's the power of reading. It doesn't feel like studying. It feels natural. And when something feels natural, you do it consistently. And consistency is what creates transformation. Now, I want you to think about your own life. Is there something you're passionate about? Something you could read about for hours? Travel, cooking, fitness, technology, fashion, music, sports, history, psychology? Whatever it is, that's your starting point. That's where your reading journey begins. Not with something you think you should read, but with something you genuinely want to read. Because that's what creates the magic that transformed Rahan. And that same magic can transform you. Let's talk about something that a lot of people struggle with. Grammar. And specifically, how reading helps you learn grammar in a way that's infinitely better than traditional grammar lessons. Now, I have nothing against grammar classes. They have their place, but let me be honest with you. Learning grammar rules and applying them are two completely different things. You can memorize 50 grammar rules and still make mistakes when you speak or write. But when you learn grammar through reading, something different happens. When you read, you're not learning grammar rules. You're learning how grammar actually works in real English. You're seeing patterns. Your brain is absorbing these patterns, even if you don't consciously realize it. Let me give you an example. Let's say you've never studied the past perfect continuous tense. It's a complicated tense. Lots of students struggle with it. But then you read this sentence in a novel. She had been waiting for hours when he finally arrived at the station. What happens? Your brain starts to understand something. You see the pattern. You understand that this sentence is talking about something that was happening in the past, before another past event. You don't need to know the name of the tense. You don't need to memorize a rule. You just understand it from context. And when you read similar sentences later, and you will, because grammar patterns repeat, your understanding deepens. You start to feel which tenses are right and which are wrong. You develop an intuition for grammar. This is so much more powerful than memorizing rules. Think about it. As a native English speaker, I don't think about grammar when I speak. I don't think, now I need to use the past perfect continuous because, no, I just speak. The grammar feels right because I've heard it thousands of times. I've internalized it. This is what reading does for you. It helps you internalize grammar. It helps you move from conscious learning, where you have to think about every rule, to subconscious mastery, where the grammar just feels right. Here's what happens the more you read. You become familiar with different sentence structures. You see how complex sentences are built. You understand how ideas are connected within and between sentences. You learn about connectors like however, furthermore, although, despite, and hundreds of others. You learn how to use them because you see them in context. You learn about adjectives and how they modify nouns. You learn about adverbs and how they modify verbs and adjectives. You learn about prepositions and how they relate to different words. And here's something really interesting. You learn not just the rules of grammar, but the exceptions. English has a lot of exceptions. It's an irregular, complicated language. You can learn all the rules in a textbook, but English speakers break those rules all the time. How do you learn the exceptions? By reading. By seeing how native speakers actually write and speak. By understanding that language is flexible and evolving. Let me give you another example. You learn in class that we usually say, I am interested in English. But then you read a sentence like, English interests me. Both are correct, but they have slightly different connotations. The first puts the focus on I and my emotions. The second puts the focus on English and its qualities. When would you use one versus the other? You understand this through reading. You see how native speakers make these choices. And suddenly, you're not just speaking correct English. You're speaking English that sounds natural and educated. One more thing about grammar and reading. When you read regularly, grammar becomes less intimidating. Many students hate grammar because it feels abstract and complicated when it's taught as rules in a classroom. But when you read, you see grammar in action. You see how sentences work. You see how ideas connect. Grammar becomes less of an abstract system and more of a practical tool that people use to communicate. And suddenly, it doesn't seem so scary. You start to appreciate it. You start to understand why certain rules exist, and your ability to apply those rules improves dramatically. Can I be honest with you about something? We live in one of the most distracting times in human history. Think about it. We have notifications coming from everywhere, our phones are buzzing, our emails are pinging, our social media feeds are endlessly scrolling. We're trying to focus on one thing and 5 other things are demanding our attention. Our attention spans are getting shorter. Our ability to concentrate is declining. And you know what? This is killing our ability to learn languages effectively. Here's why I'm bringing this up. Reading forces you to slow down. Reading demands that you focus. When you read, you can't half pay attention. You can't be scrolling through Instagram while genuinely reading a book. Well, you can try, but you won't understand anything. Reading is one of the few activities in modern life that demands full concentration, and this is actually a gift. Because when you focus, when you really concentrate on something, you learn so much more effectively. Studies have shown this over and over. When your brain is focused on one thing, it can absorb and retain information much better. When you're distracted, your brain is divided. You might think you're learning, but really you're just skimming the surface. When you read, you're forced to be present. You're present with the material. You're present with the language. And this presence makes all the difference in your learning. But here's something even more powerful. Reading for 10 minutes a day improves your concentration ability overall. It's like a workout for your attention muscle. The more you read, the better you become at focusing. And when you can focus, you learn faster. When you can focus, you understand deeper. When you can focus, you retain more. When you can focus, you're more successful in everything. Not just English learning, but school, work, and life. Think about this. Many language learners complain that they study grammar, but they forget it a week later. They learn vocabulary, but the words don't stick. Why does this happen? One major reason is that they're not giving the material their full attention. They're multitasking. They're studying while checking their phone. They're doing vocabulary exercises while watching TV. And their brain, which is naturally trying to preserve energy, is like, this isn't important. This person isn't giving it their full attention, so I don't need to remember it. But when you read, you're giving full attention. Your brain understands, this is important, this deserves my focus. And so it remembers, it retains, it learns. Reading also helps you develop patience, and patience is something that's becoming rare. Everyone wants instant results. Everyone wants to be fluent in English in a month. Everyone wants a shortcut. But language learning doesn't work that way. Language learning takes time. It takes consistent, focused effort. Reading teaches you to be okay with that. When you read a novel, you understand that you're going to spend weeks or months with this story. You're not expecting instant completion. You're enjoying the journey. You're reading one chapter at a time. And this mindset translates to language learning beautifully. When you apply the patience you develop from reading to your English learning, everything becomes easier. You stop expecting to be fluent after a few months. You understand that improvement is gradual. You're happy with small wins. You celebrate when you understand an article better than you did 3 months ago. You're excited when you use a new word in a sentence. You're motivated because you can see the progress. And this patience, combined with consistent effort, is what actually creates fluency. Let's talk about vocabulary, because vocabulary is the foundation of everything in language learning. You can have perfect grammar, but if you don't know enough words, you can't communicate. Period. Now, you can learn vocabulary in many ways. You can use flashcards, you can use apps, you can memorize word lists. And while these methods have some value, they're not the most effective. The most effective way to learn vocabulary, and this is backed up by research, is through reading. When you learn a word from a flashcard, you learn the definition. That's it. You know serendipity means a happy accident. Great. But do you really understand when and how to use it? Do you understand what kinds of situations call for this word? Do you know what words it collocates with? Do you have a feel for the word? Probably not. But when you read this word in context, say in a sentence like, "It was pure serendipity that we met at the coffee shop because I was usually never there on Tuesdays." Suddenly, you understand the word so much more deeply. You understand it's positive. You understand it's about unexpected good luck. You understand the feeling associated with it. And here's what's powerful. When you read, you encounter words in context. You don't just learn the word, you learn how it's used. You learn what kinds of words come before it and after it. You learn the feeling and tone associated with it. You learn similar words and opposite words. You learn the variations. Can it be a verb or only a noun? How is it pronounced? What letter is stressed? A single sentence gives you all this information. Try getting that from a flashcard. Let me give you another example because I really want you to understand this. Let's say you encounter the word meticulous while reading. The sentence is, "The artist was meticulous in her attention to detail, spending hours on each small section of the painting." From this sentence, what do you learn? You learn that meticulous means very careful and paying attention to details, but you also learn that it's usually a positive quality. You learn that it often relates to work and effort. You learn it can be used to describe people. You learn it pairs well with phrases like attention to detail. You learn the feeling. That meticulous work is something that takes time and dedication, and you learn the context. In this case, it's about art, but you understand, it could apply to many other fields. The more you read, the more words you encounter. And not just basic words, but words that are actually used by educated English speakers. Words that you would find in novels, articles, essays, and blogs. These are the words that separate people who just get by in English from people who truly master the language. These are the words that help you express subtle nuances. These are the words that make your writing and speaking more sophisticated and impressive. But here's the really important part. When you learn words through reading, you remember them better. Why? Because you're not just seeing them in isolation. You're seeing them in a story or article that has meaning to you. You're seeing them in a meaningful context. Your brain connects the word to the meaning and to the story. So when you encounter the word again, you remember it. You remember not just the definition, but the feeling of the word. And this makes you much more likely to use it correctly when you speak or write. Let me share a practice that's incredibly effective. When you're reading something and you encounter a new word, don't just skip it. Actually look it up. Write it down. But here's the key. Write it down with the sentence where you found it. Don't just write meticulous. Very careful. Write meticulous. The artist was meticulous in her attention to detail. The artist was meticulous in her attention to detail. Then, later, use that word in your own sentence. Try to create your own sentence using that word. Maybe you write, "My mother is meticulous about keeping the kitchen clean." And suddenly, the word is yours. You own it. You can use it naturally. Here's another powerful thing about learning vocabulary through reading. You learn thousands of words, not just hundreds. When you use flashcards or apps, you might learn 100 words a month. When you read consistently, you might encounter 100 new words in a single book. And because they're in context, and because your brain is interested in the story, you remember many more of them. Over a year of reading, you can increase your vocabulary by thousands of words. Try doing that with flashcards. You'd be sitting with cards for hours every day. And here's something else. When you read, you naturally encounter more advanced vocabulary. This is because reading materials, novels, articles, essays, are written by educated writers for educated readers. The vocabulary is richer, it's more diverse, it's more interesting. This means that as you read more, your vocabulary becomes more sophisticated. You can express more subtle meanings. You can understand more complex ideas. You can read and write at a higher level. And this elevated vocabulary level makes you stand out. People think you're more intelligent. They take you more seriously. They want to listen to you. Now, I want to talk about something that might seem simple, but is incredibly powerful. Reading aloud. Many people think, man, I read. Why do I need to also read aloud? Isn't that just slow me down? But actually, reading aloud is one of the most underutilized tools for improving your English. When you read aloud, multiple things happen at the same time. First, you're practicing pronunciation. Your mouth is moving, your tongue is positioning itself correctly, your lips are forming the right shapes. You're getting muscle memory for English sounds. Many non-native speakers have difficulty with pronunciation because they haven't practiced the physical movements required for English sounds. Reading aloud fixes this. It gives your mouth a workout. It helps you get comfortable with the sounds of English. Second, you're practicing intonation. English has a particular rhythm and melody. Sentences go up and down. Some words are stressed more than others. Native speakers intuitively know this. But if you've never heard this rhythm, it's hard to replicate. When you read aloud, especially if you're listening to an audio version at the same time, you learn this rhythm. You learn how your voice should rise and fall. You learn which words to emphasize. And this intonation is crucial for sounding natural. Third, you're practicing fluency. When you read aloud, you're learning to speak smoothly. You're learning to connect words together. You're learning the natural speed of English speech. You're learning where to pause. You're learning how native speakers actually speak, because good writing often reflects how people actually speak. So when you read aloud, you're training your mouth and your brain to produce English at a natural pace. Let me give you a concrete example. Let's say you read this passage aloud. The morning air was fresh and cool. Birds sang from the trees and the sun slowly rose above the hills. It was the perfect start to a new day. Notice how when you read this aloud, you don't rush, you slow down. You probably pause at the periods. You probably emphasize words like perfect and fresh. You probably raise your voice slightly on start because it's exciting. All of this is teaching you natural English pronunciation and intonation. Here's a practice you can do. Pick a paragraph from anything you're reading. A novel, an article, a short story, doesn't matter. Read it aloud slowly and carefully. Don't rush. Really articulate each word. Feel the rhythm. Pay attention to how your voice naturally goes up and down. Then read it again, a bit faster, more naturally. Read it a third time at a normal speaking pace. Don't rush. Really articulate each word. Feel the rhythm. Pay attention to how your voice naturally goes up and down. Then read it again a bit faster, more naturally. Read it a third time at a normal speaking pace. Don't rush. Really articulate each word. Feel the rhythm. Pay attention to how your voice naturally goes up and down. Read it again a bit faster, more naturally. Read it a third time at a normal speaking pace. Don't rush. Really articulate each word. Feel the rhythm. Pay attention to how your voice naturally goes up and down. Read it again a bit faster, more naturally. Read it a third time at a normal speaking pace. You'll notice that by the third time, you feel more comfortable. Your mouth knows where to go, your voice knows how to move. This is the practice that builds real pronunciation skills. And here's something amazing. If you can listen to an audio version of what you're reading at the same time, even better. Many books now come with audio versions. Many online articles have audio versions. As you read, listen to a native speaker reading the same words. This is incredibly powerful. You're seeing the words, hearing the words, and saying the words all at the same time. Your brain is getting multiple inputs. You're learning faster. One thing I really recommend is reading poetry aloud. I know what you might be thinking. Mono, poetry? That sounds difficult and boring. But poetry is actually amazing for pronunciation and intonation. Because poetry has rhythm and rhyme built in, it forces you to pay attention to how words sound. It forces you to feel the rhythm, and many of the most beautiful words in English are found in poetry. Plus, poetry is usually shorter, so you can practice the same poem multiple times, really getting comfortable with it. Let me give you an example. Here's a short poem. Listen to the rhythm as I read it aloud. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep. Notice the rhythm? It's almost like a song. When you read this aloud, your voice naturally follows this rhythm. And once you've read this aloud a few times, you can never hear it in your head without that rhythm. Your body remembers the rhythm, and this is exactly the kind of rhythmic memory you want for English speech. Here's my challenge to you. Find a short passage, just a paragraph or two. Read it aloud 5 times over the next 3 days. Day 1, read it once, slowly. Day 2, read it twice at a normal pace. Day 3, read it twice more. By day 3, I guarantee you'll feel much more comfortable. The words will feel familiar. Your mouth will know where to go. The rhythm will feel right. And this comfort translates directly to more confident, more fluent speech. Let me ask you something. When you watch a movie, who creates the visuals? The filmmakers, right? They show you everything. You see the character's face, you see their surroundings. You see the action. Everything is given to you. But when you read, who creates the visuals? You do. Your imagination does. And this is where reading becomes magical. When you read a book, your brain creates images, voices, emotions, and settings entirely in your mind. The author gives you words, and your imagination transforms those words into a whole world. Every reader creates a slightly different world because everyone's imagination is different. And this mental work is extremely powerful for language learning. It's like a workout for your brain. It strengthens your imagination, your creativity, and your ability to construct meaning from language. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're reading this. Sarah entered the library. The smell of old books filled the air. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, creating long shadows on the wooden floor. She could hear the quiet footsteps of other visitors and the soft rustle of turning pages. What are you doing as you read this? Your brain is creating images. You're imagining what that library looks like. You're probably thinking of a library you've been to, or creating a composite image from libraries you know about. You're imagining the smell of old books. You're seeing the sunlight and shadows. You're hearing the footsteps and page rustling. And here's what's happening in your brain. You're engaging in deep comprehension. You're not just reading words. You're understanding the mood and atmosphere the author is creating. You're understanding why these details matter. You're learning how to describe places in a way that creates feeling. You're learning sensory language. Words that appeal to the senses. And because you're engaging your imagination, your mind is more active, more interested, and more likely to remember what you read. Compare this to watching a movie. In the movie, the filmmaker decides what the library looks like. You don't have to imagine anything. You just watch. Your brain is less active. You're not exercising your imagination. You're not learning how to create images with words because the images are already created for you. And while movies are entertaining, they're not as powerful for learning as reading because your brain is doing less work. This is why reading is so valuable for creativity. The more you read, the more your imagination develops. You're constantly imagining new worlds, new characters, new situations. You're training your brain to be creative. And this creativity extends beyond just imagination. It helps you with problem solving, with thinking outside the box, with coming up with new ideas. It helps you in life, not just in language learning. Now, here's how this specifically helps your English. When you read descriptions in English, you're learning how English speakers describe things. You're learning the words they use. You're learning the style they use. And when you then try to describe something in English yourself, you have a model. You know how to do it because you've read it, you've seen it, you've imagined it. You can replicate that style. For example, let's say you read this description. The old man's hands were weathered and spotted, like a map of all the years he'd lived. What have you learned? You've learned that you can compare hands to a map. You've learned the word weathered. You've learned how to create an emotional connection through description. You've learned that details matter. The next time someone asks you to describe an old person, you have a model. You might say, her face was wrinkled like ancient leather, telling the story of her long life. You've created something original, but it's modeled after the style you learned from reading. This is one of the most beautiful aspects of reading. It feeds your creativity while simultaneously teaching you language. You're not just learning English. You're learning how to express yourself beautifully in English. You're learning how to paint pictures with words, and this skill is invaluable. When you can describe things beautifully, when you can tell stories that captivate people, when you can use language creatively, that's when people really want to listen to you. That's when you truly master a language. One thing I've noticed with many English learners is that they can talk about basic things, but when it comes to emotions, they struggle. They know words like happy and sad, but they can't express the range of human emotions. They can't say things like, I felt melancholic, or I was exhilarated, or I experienced a moment of pure bliss. This is a major limitation in language learning because emotions are so important in human communication. When you share emotions authentically, you connect with people. You create real relationships. You sound like a real human being, not a robot spouting memorized phrases. And how do you learn emotional vocabulary? Through reading. When you read novels and stories, you're constantly encountering characters who experience different emotions. And because the author is skilled, they don't just tell you he was sad. They show you, they describe it, and through those descriptions, you learn the vocabulary of emotion. You learn the subtle differences between different emotions. You learn how emotions feel physically. You learn how to express emotions in a way that others can truly understand. Let me give you examples. Let's say you read this. She received the rejection letter and her heart sank. She felt a hollow ache in her chest. Her hands trembled as she read the words again and again, hoping somehow they would change. What have you learned about disappointment? You've learned that it's physical. You've learned words like hollow ache. You've learned that it can be paralyzing. You've learned the specificity of emotion. Contrast this with just knowing the word disappointed. You understand so much more about disappointment now. Or consider this. When he saw her walk into the room, his breath caught, his pulse quickened. He couldn't look away. In that moment, nothing else mattered. What have you learned about being attracted to someone or being in love? You've learned the physical sensations. You've learned how to express intense emotion. You've learned that emotion can be shown through body language and physical reactions, not just stated. Or this. As the music swelled, tears streamed down her face. She felt a lump in her throat. Her chest felt tight with emotion too big to contain. What have you learned about being moved or inspired? You've learned how to describe overwhelming emotion. You've learned the vocabulary of feeling touched or moved by something beautiful. The beautiful thing is, once you've read these descriptions of emotion, when you experience similar emotions in your own life, you can express them. You might be going through a difficult time, and a friend asks, "How are you feeling?" Instead of just saying sad, you might say, "I feel a hollow ache in my chest. I can't seem to think straight." Your friend understands you better. They feel your emotion more deeply. They can empathize with you more effectively. This is incredibly important in real relationships. When you can express your emotions authentically and vividly, people understand you better. They care about you more. They want to help you more. And in the context of language learning, being able to express emotions fluently means you're truly communicating. You're not just exchanging information, you're sharing yourself. Let me give you a practice. Think of a strong emotion you've experienced recently. Maybe happiness, fear, anger, sadness, or anxiety. Now, write a few sentences describing that emotion. Don't just say, "I was happy." Describe what happiness felt like. Did your chest feel light? Did you smile? Did you feel like you could do anything? Did everything around you seem brighter? Try to paint a picture of the emotion. For example, when I passed my exam, I felt a surge of joy. My face broke into a huge smile. I felt like I was floating. Everything around me seemed more colorful and beautiful. I wanted to tell everyone and share my happiness. When you do this practice regularly, you develop emotional vocabulary. And this emotional vocabulary makes you a better communicator in every way. It makes you more expressive. It makes you more relatable. It makes you sound more intelligent and more human. And it all comes from reading the descriptions other writers have created. Here's something really important that often gets overlooked when people talk about language learning. Language is not just a system of words and grammar. Language is culture. Language is how people think. Language is how people see the world. And when you learn a language without understanding the culture, you're missing half the picture. You can speak the words, but you don't truly understand what they mean. You can follow the rules, but you don't understand the spirit behind them. Reading helps you understand culture in a deep way. When you read books, articles, and blogs written by people from different countries and backgrounds, you start to see the world through their eyes. You start to understand how they think. You start to appreciate their values, their humor, their way of communicating. This is incredibly valuable for language learning because then when you use the language, you're not just using the correct words and grammar, you're using them in a culturally appropriate way. Let me give you examples. If you read an American novel, you'll notice certain characteristics. American writing often values directness. Americans tend to get to the point. They like action and plot-driven stories. They value individuality and innovation. They use a lot of slang and casual language, even in more formal situations. When you read American books and articles, you absorb this style. Then, when you speak or write English in an American context, you naturally match this style. Now compare that to reading a British novel. British writing often feels more formal, even in casual settings. It's more indirect. There's often more emphasis on character development and subtle details. British humor is often dry and understated. The vocabulary is sometimes different. They use different words for common things. When you read British writing, you absorb a different style of English. And if you're communicating with British English speakers, this understanding helps you a lot. Or if you read Indian English writers, you'll notice different characteristics. Indian English has its own color. It often has more flowery descriptions. There are cultural references that are uniquely Indian. The rhythm and pace are different. If you only learned English from an American textbook, you might be surprised by Indian English. But if you read Indian authors, you understand. You appreciate the differences. You can communicate effectively with Indian English speakers because you understand their cultural perspective. This cultural understanding is so important for real communication, because when you understand someone's cultural perspective, you can communicate more effectively with them. You can avoid misunderstandings. You can appreciate humor. You can understand why they emphasize certain things. You can adapt your communication to be more effective. And all of this comes from reading. Here's another thing about reading and cultural understanding. Through reading, you learn about different values and ways of living. If you read memoirs or novels from different countries, you learn how people live differently. You learn about different family structures, different approaches to education, different views on success, different ways of celebrating, different approaches to relationships. And this broadens your mind. It makes you more empathetic. It makes you less judgmental. It makes you a better global citizen. For example, if you read a novel by a Japanese author, you might learn about the value of harmony and group consensus in Japanese culture. If you read by an Australian author, you might learn about their casual, outdoor lifestyle and their dry humor. If you read by a Nigerian author, you might learn about the importance of family and community. None of these things are explicitly taught, but as you read, you absorb them. You understand the culture better, and when you speak English with people from these countries, you understand them better. You avoid saying things that might be offensive. You appreciate their perspective. You communicate more effectively. Let me give you a practice. Pick an author from a country that interests you. Read one of their short stories or a chapter from their book. After reading, think about what you learned about that culture. What are the values that seem important? What is the pace of life? What is the sense of humor? How do people relate to each other? What is the environment like? Write down 3 things you learned about the culture. Do this with authors from several different countries. Over time, you'll have a much richer understanding of the English-speaking world and beyond. Let me ask you something. When was the last time someone told you a story that completely captivated you, where you forgot about everything else and were just absorbed in what they were saying? Stories are powerful. Stories are how humans have communicated for thousands of years. Way before writing, way before technology, stories are in our DNA. And you know what's interesting? Great storytellers aren't born. They're made. They develop their skill by reading, by hearing stories, by seeing how stories work. Reading teaches you how to tell stories. It's not obvious, but it's true. When you read stories, you're learning the structure of stories. You're learning how to build tension. You're learning how to create interesting characters. You're learning how to develop a plot. You're learning how to create a satisfying ending. You're learning how to pace your narrative. You're learning all of this without even realizing it. And storytelling is an incredibly valuable skill in real life. Think about it. Job interviews, that's often about telling stories. They ask you, tell me about a time when you solved a problem. That's a story. Networking? People tell stories about their experiences. First dates? People tell stories about themselves. Presenting ideas? Good presenters tell stories to illustrate their points. Everyday conversation? People constantly tell stories about their day, about something funny that happened, about an experience they had. When you can tell a story well, people listen, people remember, people care. And in the context of language learning, being able to tell a story means you can speak at length about something in an engaging way. You can hold someone's attention. You can sound fluent because you're not searching for words. You're absorbed in your narrative. Reading trains you in storytelling. When you read, you see how authors structure their narratives. They usually start with a hook, something that grabs your attention. Then they develop the setting and characters. Then they introduce a problem or conflict. Then they show how the character tries to solve the problem. Then they resolve it. The resolution might be happy or sad, but there's a resolution. And this structure is what makes stories satisfying. Once you've read hundreds of stories with this structure, you internalize it. When you tell a story yourself, you naturally follow this structure. Let me give you an example. Imagine you want to tell someone about a time you got lost. If you haven't read many stories, you might just say, "I got lost yesterday. I was looking for a restaurant and took a wrong turn. Eventually, I found it." Boring, right? But if you've read many stories, you might tell it like this. "Yesterday, I was supposed to meet my friend at this amazing restaurant she'd been raving about. I was so excited. But when I arrived at the address she gave me, I realized I was completely lost. The street names made no sense. I didn't recognize anything. I started to panic. I thought, what if I'm late? What if she leaves? I checked my phone and realized my battery was almost dead. I couldn't call her. I couldn't use GPS. I was genuinely stuck. So I did the only thing I could do. I asked a stranger for directions. And you know what? That stranger was incredibly nice. She walked me to the restaurant. I made it just in time. And I made a new friend that day." See the difference? The second version has tension. It has emotion. It has a satisfying resolution. It's interesting. People want to listen. And how did you learn to tell it this way? By reading, by seeing how authors build narratives, by absorbing the structure and the emotional beats. Here's a practice. Think of something that happened to you recently. Doesn't have to be dramatic. Maybe something funny or surprising or frustrating. Now, tell the story in a warm, friendly tone. Where were you? What were you doing? Introduce the problem or unexpected situation. Build the tension or surprise. Then resolve it. Try to include some sensory details. Try to include some dialogue. Try to make it interesting. Share it with someone and see how they react. I bet they'll be more engaged than if you just stated the facts. And here's what happens when you do this practice regularly. You become a better storyteller. And when you can tell stories well in English, people notice. They think you're a better English speaker. They want to hear more of your stories. They want to know you better. And from a language learning perspective, storytelling allows you to speak in longer passages without getting stuck. You're not stopping to think of individual words because you're focused on the narrative. The words flow more naturally. You sound more fluent. I want to shift gears for a moment because there's something really important we haven't talked about yet. Reading doesn't just help your English. Reading helps your entire person. Reading is a form of self-care. Reading is good for your mental health. And I think this is worth discussing because it's often overlooked in language learning circles. You know how life can be stressful. Work, school, relationships, finances, health. There are so many things that can cause stress and anxiety. And we're living in a world where stress is constant. We're always on. We're always on. We're always receiving information and stimulation. Our nervous systems are always activated. And this is exhausting. It's damaging to our mental health. Depression and anxiety are becoming increasingly common. Here's where reading comes in. Reading is one of the few activities that can genuinely calm your mind. When you read, you're stepping away from the stressful world. You're entering into another world, the world of the book. You're giving your mind permission to focus on something other than your problems. You're engaging your imagination in a positive way. You're giving your nervous system a break. Scientists have studied this, and the results are clear. Reading reduces stress. It lowers anxiety. It can help with depression. It can improve sleep. It can increase empathy. It can improve mood. And here's the bonus. This peaceful state is actually perfect for learning. When your brain is relaxed, it can absorb information more easily. When your brain is stressed, you're in fight or flight mode. Your brain is focused on survival, not learning. But when you're reading in a relaxed state, your brain is open. It's receptive. It's able to form new neural connections. It's able to learn and remember information more effectively. So reading serves a double purpose for language learners. It helps your mental health, you feel more calm, more peaceful, more happy, and it also helps your language learning, because when you're in a relaxed state, you learn more effectively. It's like a bonus. You're taking care of yourself and learning English at the same time. Here's something I recommend. Make reading a part of your daily routine, not as a chore, not because you should, but because you genuinely want to. Find books or articles that make you happy. Maybe they're funny and make you laugh. Maybe they're comforting and soothing. Maybe they're exciting and gripping. Whatever makes you happy. Set aside time every day, even just 10 or 15 minutes, to read something that brings you joy. Use this time as your self-care time. Use it to escape stress. Use it to calm your mind. And while you're doing this, you're also improving your English. It's beautiful, really. I often tell people, if you're stressed about language learning, the best thing you can do is read something that makes you happy. Read fiction that you love. Read articles about topics that interest you. Don't read because it's good for your English. Read because it feels good, and your English will improve as a side effect. But more importantly, your mental health will improve. You'll feel calmer, you'll feel happier. And when you feel better emotionally, everything in your life improves, not just language learning. Here's something interesting that might surprise you. Reading and listening are actually connected. They're not separate skills. They feed each other. And understanding this connection can dramatically improve both your reading and listening comprehension. When you read often, especially stories and dialogues, your brain starts to build a model of how natural English sounds. You understand the patterns of spoken English. You understand the rhythm. You understand the intonation. You understand the pacing. And this understanding improves your listening comprehension, even though you're not actively listening while you read. Here's how it works. When you read a conversation in a book, you're seeing how people actually talk. You see contractions like I'm, don't, and you're. You see short responses like really or I see. You see casual language that doesn't follow perfect grammar rules. You see interruptions and overlapping speech and dialogue. You see ellipses where someone trails off. You see dashes where someone pauses. All of these things are showing you how real English is spoken. Your brain is absorbing these patterns. Then, when you actually hear English in movies, podcasts, conversations, your brain recognizes these patterns. You've already seen them in written form, so when you hear them, they're familiar. Your brain can process them faster. Your listening comprehension improves. Let me give you an example. Let's say you read this dialogue in a book. A, hey, did you finish the book I lent you? B, yeah, I did. It was so good. I couldn't put it down. A, I know, right? The ending was crazy. B, totally. I didn't see that twist coming. What are you learning from this dialogue? You're learning that when people ask questions, they use contractions. Did you becomes didya. In casual speech, You're learning that people use short responses, yeah, instead of yes, I did. You're learning that people use intensifiers like so good and totally. You're learning that people often just say, I know, right? Instead of a full sentence. You're learning that people might say, I didn't see that twist coming, instead of the grammatically correct, I didn't see that twist approaching. Now, when you actually hear people talking in English, all of these patterns are familiar. You're not struggling to understand because you've already seen these patterns in written form. This makes listening comprehension so much easier. This is why I always say to students, if you want to improve your listening, read more. It seems counterintuitive, but it works. When you read, you're training your brain to recognize English patterns, whether they're written or spoken. There's another way reading helps listening. When you read about topics that interest you, you're building vocabulary in those areas. Then, when you hear or watch content about those same topics, you understand more because you already know the vocabulary. For example, if you read a lot about sports, you'll know words like offense, defense, penalty, foul, and so on. So when you watch a sports broadcast in English, you understand more because you already know the words. The reverse is also true. When you listen to a lot of podcasts or watch a lot of movies, your listening comprehension improves. And this actually helps your reading too. You start to recognize written words as having specific pronunciations. You start to understand the connection between written English and spoken English. You become more fluent in both. So here's my recommendation. Combine reading and listening. Read books in areas that interest you. Then listen to podcasts or watch videos about the same topics. If you read about technology, listen to tech podcasts. If you read about travel, watch travel videos. This combination reinforces the language on multiple levels. You're reading it, you're hearing it, you're speaking it. If you discuss it with someone, and you're thinking about it, your brain is getting a thorough workout in multiple modalities. Here's a practice. Pick an article on a topic you like. Read it carefully. Write down 5 to 10 new words. Then find a podcast or video on the same topic. Listen to it, specifically listening for the words you just learned. You'll be amazed at how much more you understand, and this practice builds your confidence. You realize you're actually understanding real English content. That's incredibly motivating. Let's get really practical for a moment. I want to talk about how reading helps you in everyday, real-world situations. Because language learning isn't just about some abstract skill. It's about being able to function in the real world, and reading prepares you for that. Think about all the reading we do in daily life without even thinking about it. We read menus at restaurants, we read instructions on products, we read signs and directions. We read emails and text messages. We read forms when we visit the doctor or open a bank account. We read contracts. We read food labels. We read reviews before we buy something. We read maps. We read schedules. We read news. We read social media. We read job postings if we're looking for work. All of this reading is part of normal life. Now, imagine you're in an English-speaking country and you can't read well. You go to a restaurant and you can't understand the menu. You might order something you don't want. Or you might feel embarrassed asking for help. You go to a doctor and you can't understand the forms. You might miss important information about your health. You try to follow instructions for something and you're confused. You miss important details. You get a job and you can't read the emails properly. You make mistakes. You feel incompetent. But if you've been reading, all of these situations are manageable. You understand menus because you've read descriptive English. You understand forms because you've seen that language before. You understand instructions because you've read plenty of instructions. You can read emails quickly and accurately because you've practiced reading in different contexts. Let me give you a specific example. Restaurant menus. On a menu, items are described in a particular way. They might say something like, pan-seared salmon fillet with lemon butter sauce, served with seasonal vegetables and roasted potatoes. If you've never read descriptions like this, you might not understand what you're ordering. But if you've read food blogs or cookbooks, this description is familiar. You know what pan-seared means. You know what lemon butter sauce is. You understand what seasonal vegetables means, so you can order confidently. Another example. Product instructions. Let's say you buy a new appliance and it comes with instructions. The instructions might say something like, ensure the device is unplugged before cleaning. Another example. Product instructions. Let's say you buy a new appliance and it comes with instructions. The instructions might say something like, ensure the device is unplugged before cleaning. Here's a practice. Find a real-world document in English. Maybe a recipe, a product manual, a job listing, a rental agreement, anything you can find. Read it carefully. Try to understand it without translating. Ask yourself, what is this document asking me to do? What information is it giving me? What decisions do I need to make based on this information? This practice helps you read for real-world purposes, not just for learning, and it makes you much more confident when you encounter these situations in real life. And here's something important. Reading real-world documents also teaches you business English and formal English, because many of these documents use more formal language than everyday conversation. If you only listen to conversational English, you might not be prepared for formal English. But when you read emails, contracts, and business documents, you learn formal English naturally. You learn how to structure formal communication. You learn professional vocabulary. And this makes you more employable. It makes you more capable of functioning in a professional setting. Many English learners tell me they fear public speaking. They fear presentations. They fear group discussions. They fear being put on the spot and having to express their thoughts in front of others. This is actually a very common fear. But here's the good news. Reading can help you overcome this fear and become a confident speaker in these situations. Why? Because when you read articles, essays, and opinion pieces, you're exposed to how educated people think and express their ideas. You see how they structure arguments. You see how they present evidence. You see how they address different viewpoints. You see how they build convincing cases for their opinions. And all of this gives you a blueprint for how to do the same. For example, when you read an opinion piece about a social issue, you might read something like, climate change is one of the most pressing issues of our time. Scientists agree that human activities are the primary cause. Furthermore, the effects are already visible in rising sea levels and extreme weather events. Therefore, we must take immediate action. One solution is to invest in renewable energy sources. Another is to reduce our consumption. By taking these steps, we can slow climate change and protect future generations. What have you learned from this short passage? You've learned a formula for expressing an opinion. You start with your main point, you provide evidence, you explain why it matters, you suggest solutions, you conclude with a call to action. When you read many opinion pieces, you internalize this structure. Then, when you're in a discussion and someone asks your opinion on something, you can naturally follow this structure. This doesn't mean you have to memorize an exact format. It means that your brain has absorbed the general pattern of how to express opinions clearly and convincingly. You don't have to think about the structure. It comes naturally because you've read hundreds of examples. Here's another benefit. When you read about various topics, you build knowledge, and knowledge is power in discussions. When you're in a group discussion about a topic, the more you know about it, the more confident you feel. You can contribute meaningfully. You can understand different perspectives. You can ask intelligent questions, and all of this comes from reading. The person who reads widely is going to be the person who can discuss topics intelligently. Let me give you a practice. Find an article on a topic you're interested in, something current, something that people have different opinions about. Read it carefully. Then write down your own opinion on the topic. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? What questions do you have? Then try to explain your opinion to someone else, a friend, a family member, or even just recording yourself. Express your opinion the way an educated English speaker would. Practice building a case for what you believe. Do this regularly with different topics, and you'll notice that expressing yourself becomes easier. Your confidence grows. When you're in a real discussion, you're not scared. You're ready. You've practiced. You've practiced about the topics. You know how to express yourself. You sound intelligent and articulate. And this confidence extends beyond just discussions. It carries into your overall English ability. Let me be clear about something. Reading and writing are deeply connected. You cannot become a good writer without being a good reader. This is something that all writing teachers know. The writers who are excellent readers, they've read so much that they understand instinctively what makes writing good. They understand what flows, they understand what sounds right, they understand style. Here's why. When you read, you're seeing thousands of examples of good writing. You see different sentence structures, you see how complex ideas are expressed clearly, you see how paragraphs are organized, you see how sentences connect to each other. You see the tools writers use, metaphors, similes, alliteration, parallelism, all these techniques that make writing more effective and beautiful. And all of this sinks into your subconscious. When you sit down to write, all of this knowledge is there. You don't have to consciously think about it. Your writing is better because you've read so much. Let me give you an example. Imagine two students are writing an essay. Student A has read a lot. Student B hasn't read much. Let's see what happens. Student A sits down to write about the importance of education. They write, "Education is the foundation of a successful life. Without education, people lack the tools to navigate the modern world. Furthermore, education opens doors to opportunities that would otherwise remain closed." This is clear, well-structured, and well-expressed. Why? Because student A has read many essays and knows instinctively how to structure ideas. Student B, who hasn't read much, might write, "Education is good. It helps people. If you have education, you can get a good job. Education is important for everyone." This is repetitive. It's unclear. The ideas don't flow well. Why? Because student B hasn't read examples of good writing. They don't have a model to follow. The solution is simple. If student B reads more, their writing will improve. Not because they're studying writing techniques, but because they're absorbing how good writing works through reading. Here's something specific. When you read opinion essays, you learn how to write opinion essays. When you read personal essays, you learn how to write personal essays. When you read news articles, you learn the structure and style of news writing. When you read blogs, you learn how to write engagingly for an online audience. Reading specific genres teaches you how to write in those genres. Let me give you a practice. Find a type of writing you want to improve. Maybe you want to write better emails. Maybe you want to write better stories. Maybe you want to write better social media posts. Let me give you a practice. Find a type of writing you want to improve. Maybe you want to write better emails. Maybe you want to write better stories. Maybe you want to write better social media posts. You'll notice that your writing improves immediately because you're imitating the style you've been reading. For example, if you want to improve your email writing, read professional emails. Notice they usually have a clear subject line. They usually start with a greeting. They have a clear purpose stated early. They're concise. They end with a call to action. They're signed off professionally. Once you've read several professional emails, when you write an email yourself, you naturally follow this structure. Your email is more professional and more effective. The same goes for other types of writing. Read blogs if you want to write blogs. Read short stories if you want to write stories. Read poetry if you want to write poetry. Read social media posts if you want to write engaging posts. In every case, reading good examples of the form makes your own writing better. Okay, we've talked about why reading is important. We've talked about all the benefits. But here's the thing. Knowing that reading is important and actually developing a reading habit are two different things. Many people recognize the value of reading, but they don't actually read consistently. They intend to read, they think about reading, but then they get busy or distracted or tired, and reading falls by the wayside. So let's talk about how to actually build a consistent reading habit that sticks. The first thing to understand is that you don't need to read a lot to see results. This is important. Many people think they need to read for hours every day to make progress. Then they think they can't do that, so they don't read at all. But the truth is, reading just a few minutes a day is incredibly powerful. Reading 5 to 10 minutes daily is better than reading for 2 hours once a week. Why? Because consistency matters more than volume. Your brain learns through repeated exposure. Small doses of consistent input are more powerful than large doses that are sporadic. So set a realistic goal. Don't aim to read for an hour a day if you're not currently reading at all. Aim to read for 5 or 10 minutes a day. That's achievable. That's sustainable. That will create change over time. The second thing is to make reading part of your daily routine. Attach it to something you already do. Maybe you read every morning with your coffee. Maybe you read for 10 minutes before bed. Maybe you read during lunch. Maybe you read on your commute. The specific time doesn't matter. What matters is that it's consistent. It's the same time every day, so your brain knows to expect it. Your habits form more easily when they're attached to existing routines. The third thing is to remove friction. Make reading as easy as possible. If you like physical books, keep a book where you can easily access it. Keep one on your bedside table, one in your bag, one on your desk, so whenever you have a few minutes, you can read. If you prefer digital reading, download an app on your phone. Have several articles or books ready to go, so whenever you want to read, you don't have to spend time searching for something to read. It's there, ready for you. The fourth thing, and this is crucial, is to choose reading material that you actually enjoy. I cannot stress this enough. If you're reading something you don't like, you won't stick with it. You won't want to read, so choose books and articles about topics that genuinely interest you. If you love cooking, read food blogs and cookbooks. If you love music, read about music. If you love science, read science articles. If you love travel, read travel blogs and memoirs. The topic doesn't matter. What matters is that you're interested. When you're interested, you naturally want to keep reading. You're not forcing yourself. The fifth thing is to track your progress. This is motivating. Keep a simple log. Every time you read, write down what you read and for how long. It doesn't have to be complicated. Just a simple note. Today, I read a travel blog post for 10 minutes. As you see your reading accumulate, you feel motivated. You want to keep going. You start to see yourself as someone who reads. And this identity shift is powerful. Once you see yourself as a reader, you naturally read more. Once you see yourself as a reader, you naturally read more. You're more likely to keep reading. You get recommendations. You get to discuss what you're reading. You feel supported. And this community aspect makes reading more enjoyable. Here's a challenge for you. For the next week, commit to reading for 10 minutes a day. That's it, just 10 minutes. Don't aim for more. Pick something you genuinely want to read, set a specific time, and read every single day for those 10 minutes. After a week, see how you feel. Most people find that after a week, reading becomes automatic. They start wanting to read more. They start looking forward to their reading time. And then it's easy to maintain the habit. The hardest part is just starting. One thing that stops people from reading is they don't know what to read. They think, I'm not advanced enough for real books. I need to read something easier. Or they start reading something and it's too difficult, and they get discouraged and give up. So let's talk about how to choose reading material that's appropriate for your level. This is actually really important. The key concept is what I call comprehensible input with a challenge. It means the material should be mostly understandable, but with some challenge. It should stretch you a little bit, but not overwhelm you. If everything is familiar, you don't learn anything new. But if too much is unfamiliar, you get frustrated and give up. Here's a guideline. If you understand about 80% of what you're reading, that's the sweet spot. You understand most of it, you can follow the main ideas, but there are new words and structures for you to learn. That's the ideal difficulty level. Now, how do you know if something is at the right level? You try it. Read the first page or the first few paragraphs. Ask yourself, do I understand most of this? Can I get the main idea even if I don't understand every word? If the answer is yes, go ahead and read it. If you're completely lost, try something easier. For beginners, start with material specifically designed for learners. Children's books are great because the language is simple but the stories are entertaining. Comic books or graphic novels are wonderful because the pictures help you understand. Simplified versions of classic books are available. These are books that have been rewritten with simpler vocabulary and shorter sentences, but they're still stories worth reading. As you progress to an intermediate level, you can start reading more authentic material. Short stories are perfect because they're not too long, so they're not overwhelming. Blogs about topics you're interested in are great. Young adult novels are often accessible but still interesting. Articles from news sources written for learners, many news sites have special sections with simpler language. As you advance to upper intermediate and advanced levels, you can start reading authentic novels, magazines, and newspapers. You can read any book you want. You might still need to look up words, but you can follow the story. You can understand most of what you read. Here's something important. Don't rush to advanced material just because you think you should. If a book is too difficult, it's not helpful. You'll spend more time looking up words than actually reading. You'll get frustrated. But if a book is at the right level, you'll flow through it. You'll learn naturally. You'll enjoy it. And when you finish, you feel accomplished. Let me give you a strategy for choosing material. Start by thinking about what you like. What topics interest you? What kinds of stories do you enjoy? Then, search for material on that topic that's appropriate for your level. For example, if you're intermediate level and you love sports, don't try to read a complex sports biography. Instead, read current sports news articles or a young adult sports novel. Same interest, but appropriate difficulty level. Here's another strategy. Start with something short. A short story is better than a novel when you're starting out. A blog post is better than a whole book. A children's book is better than an adult novel. Short material is less intimidating. It's easier to finish, and when you finish, you feel successful. This success motivates you to read more. Here's a practice. Go online and search for Short Stories for English Learners or English Stories Intermediate Level. You'll find tons of resources. Pick one that appeals to you. Read it. You might need to look up some words, and that's fine. Finish the story. Feel proud that you read it in English. Then read another one. Build your confidence through short, achievable reading. Let me take you to another level with reading. This is something that truly separates fluent English speakers from people who are still translating. Thinking in English. Not speaking English, not reading English, But thinking in English, this is the ultimate goal, and reading is how you get there. Here's what happens when you're a beginning English learner. You think in your native language, then you translate to English when you speak. It's slow, it's clunky, it doesn't feel natural. But as you progress, something magical happens. Especially if you read a lot, your brain starts to think directly in English. You don't translate. You just think in English naturally. And when you speak, the words just come out. This is fluency. This is when you know you've really learned a language. And reading is the primary way you get there. Why? Because when you read, you're exposing your brain to English thought patterns. You're seeing how English speakers organize thoughts. You're seeing the rhythm of English thinking. Your brain is absorbing the logic and structure of English. Let me give you an example. In English, we often think in terms of time and sequence. We think about what happened first, then what happened next, then what happened last. We also think in terms of cause and effect. This happened because of that. We think in terms of opposites and contrasts. This is different from that. This English way of thinking is reflected in how English writers structure their ideas. When you read, you're not just learning the words, you're learning to think like an English speaker thinks. Your brain is forming neural pathways that organize thoughts the English way. Slowly, these pathways become automatic. You start thinking in English naturally. You don't even realize it's happening until one day you notice that you're thinking in English without trying. Here's how you can encourage this process. When you read a paragraph in English, after finishing it, close your eyes and try to think about the main idea in English. Don't translate into your native language. What was the main point? What was interesting about it? What did you think about it? Try to form complete sentences in your head in English. Do this every time you read. You're training your brain to think in English. This is advanced, but it's the next level of English mastery. Most learners never reach this level because they don't read enough. But when you do reach this level, when you're thinking in English, your English becomes truly natural. You're not learning English anymore. You're just speaking your language, which happens to be English. I want to talk about something that's more philosophical, but incredibly important. I want to talk about identity, specifically your identity as a reader. Because once you identify as a reader, once you see yourself as someone who reads, everything changes. You read more, you enjoy it more, you're more committed to it. Your language improvement accelerates. Think about it. There are people who identify as readers and people who don't. Readers think things like, I love reading. I'm always reading something. I can't live without books. These people read because it's part of who they are. It's not a chore. It's not something they're forcing themselves to do. It's just part of their identity. Now, how do you develop this identity? You start by reading. You read consistently. You finish a book. You feel proud. You read another book. You start noticing improvements in your English. You feel proud. You tell people about books you've read. You recommend books to friends. Slowly, you start to see yourself as a reader. And once you see yourself that way, it sticks. You become a reader. And readers read. It's what they do. Here's something interesting. Research shows that identity is a very powerful driver of behavior. More powerful than willpower. More powerful than motivation. If you identify as something, you do the behaviors associated with that identity. If you identify as a reader, you read. If you identify as a runner, you run. If you identify as someone who eats healthy, you eat healthy. You're not forcing yourself, you're just being who you are. So part of building a reading habit is deliberately adopting the identity of a reader. Start telling people, I'm a reader. Start seeing yourself that way. When you're making decisions, what to do this evening, where to spend your money. think as a reader would think. What book do I want to buy? What time can I read today? This small shift in identity makes a huge difference. Here's a practice. Write down, I am a reader. Say it out loud. Really feel it. Think about what being a reader means to you. What does a reader do? A reader spends time with books. A reader thinks about stories and ideas. A reader sees the world through the eyes of characters. A reader learns through reading. A reader is always learning and growing. Does this feel true for you? If not yet, keep reading until it does. Keep building your reading habit until this identity feels real. And once this identity is established, everything flows from there. You naturally make time for reading. You naturally choose reading over other activities sometimes. You naturally get excited about books. You naturally improve your English because you're reading consistently. The identity is the foundation. Everything else follows from it. Now, let me give you some specific exercises you can do with your reading to maximize learning. These are practical techniques that will help you learn more effectively from everything you read. Exercise 1. The Vocabulary Harvest. This is simple but incredibly effective. As you read, whenever you encounter a word you don't know, note it down. Don't stop your reading flow. Just mark it and keep going. After you finish a paragraph or a section, go back and look up the words you marked. Write them down with the sentence where you found them. Don't just write the definition. Write the full sentence. This gives you context. Later, try to use that word in a sentence of your own. For example, if you marked ephemeral, you might write, "The beauty of cherry blossoms is ephemeral. They bloom for only a few weeks each spring." My own sentence, "The happiness I felt at that moment was ephemeral, disappearing as quickly as it had come." Exercise 2. Summarization practice. After finishing a section or chapter, write a short summary. Just 1 or 2 sentences. What was the main idea? What was the key point? Don't translate into your native language. Do it in English. Do it in your own words. This helps you check your comprehension. If you can't summarize what you read, it means you didn't understand it well enough. Practice until you can summarize smoothly. Exercise 3. Reflection writing. This is where you take what you read and reflect on it. After finishing a reading, ask yourself, what did I think about this? Do I agree? What did I learn? What do I want to remember? Write a few sentences reflecting on these questions. This deepens your understanding and helps you retain the information better. Exercise 4. Active prediction. As you read a story, periodically pause and predict what will happen next. What do you think will happen to the character? Why do you think that? Then keep reading and see if you were right. This keeps your mind engaged. It makes reading more interactive. It helps you understand the logic of storytelling. Exercise 5. Dialogue practice. When you encounter dialogue in your reading, try to read it aloud. Imagine the characters. Try to give them different voices. Try to feel the emotion in the dialogue. This helps you understand how people talk. It helps with pronunciation and intonation, and it's fun. Exercise 6. Creating a reading journal. Keep a dedicated journal for your reading. Every time you read something, write down the title, the author, what it was about, new words you learned, and your personal response. For example, today I read an article about climate change. I learned the words carbon footprint and renewable energy. I found it fascinating that solar power is becoming more affordable. This makes me optimistic about the future. Exercise 7. The Translation Challenge. Pick a paragraph you really like. Try to translate it into your native language. Then, without looking at the original, translate it back into English. See how close you can get to the original. This is a fun way to check your understanding and notice sentence structures. Exercise 8. Question generation. As you read, generate questions about the text. What does the author mean by this? Why did the character do that? What will happen next? Write down your questions. Some will be answered as you read. Some you'll need to think about. This active questioning keeps you engaged with the material. These exercises might seem like a lot, but you don't need to do all of them with every reading. Pick the ones that resonate with you. Use different exercises with different readings. The goal is to be an active reader, not a passive one. Active readers learn much more than passive readers. Let me address some common challenges that readers face, especially English learners, because I know that not everything about reading is easy, and if we can address these challenges, you'll be much more likely to stick with reading long term. Challenge 1. Not understanding every word. Many learners think they need to understand every single word in order to successfully read. This is wrong. You don't need to understand every word. In fact, it's impossible. Even native English speakers don't know every word they encounter. The key is understanding enough to follow the main idea. Aim for about 80% comprehension. If you understand 80%, you can figure out the rest from context. Don't let this perfectionism stop you from reading. Give yourself permission to not know some words. Just keep reading. Challenge 2. Reading too slowly. Many learners read word by word very slowly because they're trying to understand every word. This makes reading tedious and takes forever. Instead, try to read a bit faster. Trust that you can understand the main idea even if you're not understanding every detail. Reading a bit faster actually makes comprehension easier because your brain can see the bigger picture. Try to read this similar to how you'd read in your native language. Challenge 3. Translating everything. Some learners read an English sentence and immediately translate it into their native language. This is slow and prevents you from developing fluency in English. Instead, try to understand meaning directly from English. Look for context clues. Use your intuition. Trust that your brain can understand English without translation. This is a shift in mindset. You might translate for a while, but gradually try to reduce translation. Challenge 4. Giving up on difficult passages. Sometimes you encounter a passage that's really difficult and you don't understand it. Your instinct might be to stop reading. Don't do that. Keep reading. Oftentimes, the author will explain the difficult concept in simpler language in the next paragraph, or you'll get more context that helps you understand. Or you'll get further in the story and the earlier difficult passage will make more sense. Reading is like a puzzle. Sometimes you don't understand one piece, but eventually the whole picture makes sense. Challenge 5. Lack of motivation. Sometimes you start reading something that seemed interesting, but it turns out to be boring. Or you're reading for study purposes and it feels like a chore. This is where you need to remember that reading should be enjoyable first and educational second. If something isn't engaging you, stop reading it. Life is too short for boring books. Find something else. Find something that makes you want to keep reading. Challenge 6. Not enough time. You think you don't have time to read. But remember, you don't need to read for long periods. Reading for 5 or 10 minutes is enough, and there are probably times you could read that you don't realize. Reading while waiting for an appointment, reading during lunch, reading before bed, reading on the commute. Find pockets of time and use them for reading. Challenge 7. Retaining what you read. You read something, but then forget it. This is natural at first, but there are strategies to help. Do the exercises I mentioned. Summarize. Write in a journal. Discuss what you read with someone. Use active recall. Try to remember what you read without looking back. These strategies help you retain information. Challenge 8. The pressure of reading important books. Sometimes people think they should read classic literature or difficult books, but this is your reading time. You get to choose. Read what you want. If you find Shakespeare fun, great. If you'd rather read young adult fiction, that's fine too. If you want to read self-help books, that's also fine. All reading is valuable. Don't put pressure on yourself to read things you don't want to read. I want to talk about something deeper. Reading is not just about learning English. Reading is about personal growth. Reading is about becoming a better person. And when you approach reading from this perspective, it changes everything. Here's what reading does. Reading exposes you to new ideas, new ways of thinking, different perspectives, different ways of living. When you read widely, you become a person with a broader perspective. You're not stuck in your own limited viewpoint. You've seen the world through hundreds of different eyes. You understand that there are many ways to live, many ways to think, many ways to be. This is incredibly valuable because when you understand that there are many ways to be, you become less judgmental, you become more empathetic, you become more open-minded. You become more interesting to be around because you can discuss many things. You become more creative because you've been exposed to new ideas. You become more compassionate because you understand different people's experiences. Reading also builds what's called a growth mindset. A growth mindset is the belief that you can improve, that you can learn, that challenges are opportunities to grow. When you read regularly, you're demonstrating to yourself that you can learn. You can read something difficult and understand it. You can learn new words. You can understand new concepts. This builds confidence in your ability to learn. And this confidence extends to everything else in your life. You believe you can improve at your job. You believe you can learn new skills. You believe you can overcome challenges. This is the power of reading. Reading also builds self-discipline. Reading requires you to sit down and focus. It requires you to resist distractions. It requires you to do something just for your personal growth, not for any external reward. This builds discipline and self-mastery, and these qualities carry over to every area of your life. Here's something I really believe. Every person who reads regularly becomes a better version of themselves. They become wiser. They become kinder. They become more interesting. They become more capable. They become more confident. They become more successful. Not because reading directly makes you more successful, but because reading builds the qualities that lead to success: knowledge, wisdom, confidence, empathy, creativity, and discipline. So when you're reading, understand that you're not just improving your English, you're improving yourself. You're investing in yourself. You're becoming the kind of person who learns, who grows, who is interested in the world. And that person is going to be successful in whatever they do. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine yourself 5 years from now. You're fluent in English. You can understand movies without subtitles. You can read novels and articles easily. You can express yourself articulately. You can discuss complex topics intelligently. You sound educated and cultured. You understand humor and nuance. You've read hundreds of books. You've traveled to English-speaking countries and communicated effortlessly. You've made friends from around the world. You've opened doors in your career that were previously closed. What changed? Reading. That consistent habit of reading that started small has transformed your entire life. This is the long-term vision. Not just improving your English enough to pass a test or have basic conversations, but becoming a person who can truly engage with English and with the world in a meaningful way. And the beautiful thing is, this isn't a luxury or a distant dream. This is available to anyone who commits to reading consistently. Reading is a lifelong practice. It's not something you do to achieve a goal and then stop. It's something you do for the rest of your life. Native English speakers don't stop reading when they become fluent. They read because they love it. They read because it makes their life richer. They read because they're curious about the world. And that's what I want you to understand. Reading isn't something you do while you're learning English. Reading is something you do for life. Once you develop this habit, you won't want to stop, because reading becomes one of your greatest sources of joy. It becomes how you learn about the world. It becomes how you relax. It becomes how you grow. I've known people who started reading in English as a way to improve their language. And yes, their language improved dramatically. But more than that, they fell in love with reading. Now, 10 years later, they're still reading. They've read hundreds of books. They have favorite authors. They follow book blogs. They're part of online reading communities. Their lives are enriched by books. This is what I want for you. I want you to start reading. I want you to develop a habit that will serve you for the rest of your life. A habit that will improve your English, yes, but also a habit that will improve your mind, your heart, your perspective, and your soul. We've talked about so much today. We've talked about why reading is important. We've talked about the benefits. We've talked about how to do it effectively. We've talked about how to build a habit. We've talked about the long-term vision. But now it's time to talk about action, because knowledge without action is just information, and information without action doesn't change your life. So I want to challenge you. Right now, after this episode ends, I want you to take action. I don't want you to wait until tomorrow or next week. I want you to do something today. What am I asking you to do? Find one piece of reading material that genuinely interests you. It could be a book, an article, a blog post, anything, but it has to be something you're actually interested in reading. Not something you think you should read, but something you want to read. And read the first page, or the first paragraph, or the first few sentences. That's it. Just get started. That's your action for today. Then, tomorrow, commit to reading for 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. Pick a time, maybe morning, maybe evening, doesn't matter, and read for 5 minutes. Do this every day for 1 week. That's 7 days of 5 minutes. 35 minutes total. That's it. After 1 week, evaluate. Do you want to keep going? Do you feel like reading more? If yes, keep going. If no, try a different book or article. The point is, don't try to change your entire life overnight. Don't try to read for an hour a day. Don't put pressure on yourself. Just start small. Just build consistency. Small actions, done consistently, create big results over time. And I want you to know something. The fact that you've listened to this entire episode means you care about improving your English. You care about growing. That's amazing. And that care, that commitment, that's what's going to drive your success. You're going to be the kind of person who reads. You're going to transform your English. You're going to transform your life. Before I let you go, I want to remind you of something. Everything we talked about today, all of it, is about empowering you. Reading isn't something that's hard or exclusive or only for certain people. Reading is for everyone. It's accessible, it's free or cheap, it's available, and it has the power to transform your life. I also want to remind you about what I mentioned at the beginning. If you found value in this episode, and I hope you did, please like it. Please share it with someone who could benefit from hearing this. Tell them about the power of reading. And most importantly, please subscribe to the MANO podcast. We create episodes like this regularly, episodes designed to help you improve your English, improve your communication skills, and improve your life in general. New episodes are posted regularly, and if you check out our podcast playlist, you'll find all our episodes organized and ready for you to binge. The podcast playlist is where everything is organized. You can find episodes on different topics, all designed to help you become a better communicator and a better person. So make sure you check that out. And remember, your English learning journey is a marathon, not a sprint. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be consistent. You just need to keep going. You just need to believe in yourself. And reading is going to be one of your greatest allies on this journey. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Thank you for caring about your growth. Thank you for being committed to becoming better. That means so much. I truly believe that the next 6 months of your life are going to be different. Your English is going to improve, your confidence is going to grow, your world is going to expand, and it's all going to start with reading. So go find that first book, go read that first page, and then keep going, one page at a time, one sentence at a time, one word at a time. You're going to transform your English, you're going to transform your life. I'm rooting for you. I really am. Keep reading, keep learning, keep growing. Until next time, this is Mono, and I'll see you in the next episode of the podcast.